Sorry. Liz? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for the, if I may, Mr. Mayor, for the benefit of the public, where a councillor being asked a question has the right to say there will be a written answer where it cannot conveniently be given orally, in which circumstance the councillor concerned must send out the answer within 10 days and all members are copied in. Question 3, Mayor. A quote from South Tyneside Council, open quotes, who operate a raking policy on their beaches. We are proud of our beaches in the South Shields and we want all who visit to have a safe and pleasant experience, close quotes. However, litter and debris on Wirral beaches impacts on how the beaches look and how they can or can't be used, which directly results in reduced visitor numbers and obviously therefore negatively affects the local economy. A neglected, unmanaged beach gives the impression to some that Wirral Council doesn't care and that they need not clean up after themselves. There is also an obvious impact on marine wildlife and bird life locally, which can eat some of the litter thinking it is food, or find themselves tangled dangerously in discarded items. The council neglect and lack of maintenance of Wirral beaches, particularly at Hoylake Beach, has resulted in just these problems: meadow grass, weeds, litter and dog faeces, which collect and hold the detritus and have created a situation which is equally bad for the community, economy and environment. As such, what impact does this council feel the growing amount of litter and debris on Wirral beaches has on visitors?
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A written response will be provided. Thank you.
Come on, George. Hi, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wondered, I appreciate what Mr. McCourt's just said about sending out a reply to all councillors, but as far as I understand it, the reason for giving the question at council is so the public would hear the answer to the question. So I'm wondering how the public is going to get to see the answer to the questions that have been given that are only going to be written back to the councillors. Each one of these things, I'm sure that most members will be aware. If I can just give you an example. If you talk about the question we're dealing with now, in the absence of the question, ask, with different things, but then it says, or a written reply. Oh, every single question's got that with it. And therefore, you've just had the Director of Law telling you within the next 10 days, the person who wrote those letters will have had to receive it. And so will all of us. We'll get a copy of those letters. I think that's pretty obvious. It is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But my question was, how is the public going to get to receive the answer? The public will get the answer. Which public? No. Just please. This is serious. The public. Excuse me. The public who are asking these questions will receive the response. What they do with that response by telling other people in the community is down to them. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if the questions were answered in public verbally at this meeting by the members they're put to, the public would view the webcast. In view of the concern, might I suggest that the questions and answers are published on the council website so that the public can refer to them?
That seems okay to me. I'm being honest with you. That's okay. Right? We'll move to Keith Randalls. And again, a question to Councillor Liz Gray.
Thank you, Mayor. The question is, Hoylake Beach is the amenity area for the residents of Hoylake as Birkenhead Park, and Central Park are for the residents of Birkenhead and Wallasey. Now, because of an overreaction of the spraying error made by the council on Hoylake Beach in August 2019, this community has now lost its amenity area through no fault of their own. The current depressing state of Hoylake Beach is having a negative effect on the Hoylake and Mells residents' daily lives. Science says people's amenity areas promote good mental health and well-being, access to clean air, providing connection space, encouraging activity in adults and children, and offering family bonding sites. This 1 mile strip of beach is so very important to this community as it is also our focal point for the 3 annual RNLI fundraising events. The town of Hoylake has long history associated to its RNLI, which are a massive part of our culture here. Many people of all ages from the surrounding areas have enjoyed access to this beach for countless years, and now they no longer can have that simple pleasure due to it being overgrown. With all of these trip hazards, this has impacted our elderly and disabled residents the most. Actually, March 16th, ECE and TC, that's the committee meeting, a proposal was put forward to allow a small 2/5 stretch of Hoylake Beach to be restored and handed back to the residents, which would have been a bit of welcome relief during the pandemic, but this was somewhat cruelly rejected. My question is, why did the Environment Committee at this worst possible time in many people's lives not show any compassion towards their health and well-being by deciding that meadow grass and the regular annual sighting of snow buntings were more important than the local people's needs, especially during the pandemic when scientists and government had informed UK residents to stay local and enjoy a daily walk to promote good, positive mental health and well-being, which is not possible here anymore due to the depressing state of this once beautiful Wirral landmark, which many local people adored.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A written response will be provided.
Mr Mayor, thank you. We've just heard from the Leader of the Council asking each councillor to treat other councillors with dignity and respect. The word respect is also due to the public. The councillors have had these questions for a long time, a matter of days. The public have turned up. It's now dark. We're in autumn. They bothered to come here. We deserve to show them some respect and provide them with an answer. This is a disgrace. This is not democracy being seen to be done.
Sorry, I accept what you just said and we move on, please. I've got another question. Sit, please. We've got a question now where the person is here. So I invite Charlotte Smith to ask the question to Councillor Jeanette Williamson. Thank you. You've got 2 minutes, please.
Cheers, thank you. Good evening, everybody. The Wirral Sand Yacht Club was recently awarded their licence following a habitat risk assessment by the council at taxpayers' expense. However, the council had declined, not offered an HRA for Hoylake Sailing Club, which hosts the annual community events such as the annual firework display and the tug of war that takes place on Boxing Day, and have been asked to actually pay for an HRA. Both these events raised much needed money for Hoylake Lifeboat, who, as you know, saves lives around the coast. Will the council be prepared to conduct an HRA like they did with the Sand Yachting Club to allow the community to enjoy their cultural activities that has taken place for many decades? There is great anger in Hoylake and Mells at the apparent disparity between one organisation being given priority over others, and that people's patience with the council is running out at the neglect of Hoylake and Mells with their amenity beach and cultural activities being taken away from them. This question has not been answered on the infamous Hoylake Beach portal. Thank you.
And thank you for keeping to time. Councillor Janet Williamson.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms Smith,
Ask
for your...
a supplementary question? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, am I here to answer the question? Yes. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, thank you for submitting that question, and I've got a response I can read out to you. Thank you. Pardon? Thank you. The Council treats all applications to carry out activities on the beach equally. It has not chosen to process some and not others. If a person or group want to carry out an activity on the beach, they need to make applications to the Council. The activities then need to be screened to determine whether they are likely to harm the conservation features of the Site of Specific Scientific Interest, SSSI, which covers the beach. If there's a likelihood of harm to the features in the SSSI, then Habitat Regulations Assessment, HRA, needs to be undertaken to look at the impact of the harm in greater depth. The HRA would then be provided to Natural England as part of an application for consent. As of the end of last week, 15th of October, no applications have been received in respect of the activities referenced in the question. There has been contact with the sailing school to make the current position known. The Council has not rejected any activities, but there is a process which has to be followed. Any persons altering the beach, even to facilitate a charity event, put themselves at risk of legal action. The Council understands the history and tradition around community events, including the RNLI, and has shared the occurrence of these events in previous years with Natural England. The Council has also sought some initial advice from the RNLI at national level in respect of the operating parameters across the beach of their equipment, and this initial response has been shared with Natural England.
Charlotte, do you have a supplementary question?
I certainly do, thank you. As someone who holds a degree in environmental studies, I have contributed to the environment by investing in smart heating, smart lighting with bulbs that do last for several years, and have even a soda stream item that cuts down on buying bottled water. What measures have councillors present here tonight have taken to help the environment? For example, do they own an electric car? That sort of thing. Thank you.
Well, short of us going around every single member here and asking them what they're all doing with the environment, I don't think that's possible to respond at this current time, but I'm sure everyone on the council will be happy to send you an email outlining what they're doing to help the environment.
Then we got statements. No request to make a statement have been made. Petitions. I have not been made aware of anyone who wishes to submit a petition. Would anyone like to submit a petition? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It was Alison first.
Alison.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Hoylake Beach community and their many supporters, I wish to present a petition of 4,500 signatures. The group are supporters of the beach for wildlife, nature and people to enjoy and thrive. Caring for our neighbourhood with a priority on health and well-being is particularly important at this time. The residents ask Wirral Council, and obviously coordination with Natural England, to resume maintenance of the beach by raking in order to restore a recreational amenity beach so to accommodate all. They're asking for a section of the beach to be raked from the new lifeboat station to King's Gap to return sand to that area. Hoylake residents, local businesses, visitors, local sports clubs and vital services have expressed concern as to the sorry state of the beach and how it has deteriorated and the adverse impact this has had in various ways. The huge loss of amenity space that is very important to people at this time. Thank you.
Well said.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a petition for another 4,000 people in relation to the current condition of Hoylake Beach. I'd like to speak briefly about compromise, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, compromise is not a protracted consultation. It is not kicking the can down the road for another 2 years, as we suddenly see at the moment. Compromise means just that, finding common ground and resolving an issue collectively. In June 2020, Councillor Gray, Chair of the Environment Committee, wrote to a bit longer now, wrote to a resident offering just that. She said, I would like to see a compromise that will please all.
Councillor Cox, please, point of order, there's 1 minute to speak, that's all. Thank you.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I haven't had long. Mr Mayor, my colleagues and I offered a compromise of a 60-40 split in favour of leaving the beach to its own devices, an offer we thought very reasonable and fair, an offer that was thrown back in our faces in the Environment Committee. Mr Mayor, I think the petitions in front of you, totalling 12,500 people between the three, I think is warrant and is justification for true compromise being sought, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Andrew Gardner.
Well, you need to stand up so we can see.
Oh, what's the matter? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I tried to raise a point of order, mainly because presenting petitions is meant to be just that, with a short explanation of what the petition is about. Not making speeches, that's two so far we've had. And while they may be very, very justified for the people who are making them, in fact, it is not within the remit of what they're supposed to be doing.
Agreed.
Mr Mayor, I'm convinced that was a statement that I made. It wasn't a speech, it was a statement just on a minute.
Mr Mayor, I'm sure Mr McCourt will explain that they have 1 minute to speak.
Board Solicitor will give us that.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to explain, members, when a petition is presented to the council, the person presenting it is allowed to address the meeting briefly, but not exceeding 1 minute, to outline the aims of the petition.
Okay.
Andrew,
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
having had that, could you please...
Mr Mayor, I take on board your comments of earlier and I will keep this brief and I have no wish to make a statement or a speech. I have 4,000 names on a petition here from the Hoylake Beach community titled Clean Our Beach. This was started 2 years ago by local people in Hoylake. It hasn't received the benefit of celebrity endorsement across the nation with people with millions of followers. This is a local petition started by local people, run by local people, and it reflects the loss of amenity in Hoylake. Hoylake Beach is Hoylake's only significant amenity space. To make matters worse, it's a meaningless loss of space, as we'll come on to later. What we see, and why this petition has 12,500 names and growing by the day, is that we have lost our beach for children, we have lost our beach for those with mobility issues, we have lost our beach for horse riders, we have lost our beach for the dog community, we have lost our beach for the people of Hoylake. The crime that we'll come on to later is the damage we are doing to wildlife, but hopefully we'll get to see that later. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Alan Brain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a petition from residents in Nursery Close, Oxton, regarding the flooding issue that they have experienced. It is a subject of a motion later in the evening, so I won't speak about it any further now.
Hold on.
Yeah, sure. Oh, you need to stand up.
Who's
Yeah, it's Liz.
Can I just ask a question, a point of clarification or order? It's about the 3 petitions that we've just been presented with. I'm just trying to do the maths and I'm just working out, is there a separate petition that's just over 12,000, or is that the same petition divided by 3 so you can make 3 speeches? Thank you.
Mr Mayor, I mean, this is, if Councillor Gray put more effort into answering that question from members of the public than she does about how people having a minute, then maybe we could actually discuss the issues. That's what the residents elected for. We might not all agree, but we could actually, have a discussion and a reasonable debate.
Members' questions. I have received 2 questions from members in advance of the meeting. Firstly, I would like to invite Councillor Chris Cook to put his question to Councillor Tony Jones. Chris.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I shouldn't need more than about 1 minute for this, actually. My question is to Councillor Tony Jones and Councillor Liz Gray. The minutes of the Policy and Resources Committee, held on 30th June this year, record that on a motion by Councillor Elizabeth Gray, seconded by Councillor Tony Jones, it was resolved unanimously that committee notes the significant overlap between the terms of reference of the Economy, Regeneration and Development Committee and the Environment, Climate Emergency and Transport Committee, and requests that these committees work jointly with the Economy and Regen leading on active travel issues which affect major regeneration master plan projects, and the Environment Committee leading on all other transport, active travel and road safety strategy and schemes. In order to ensure that active travel is progressed in a timely manner, can the chairs of both committees assure Council that a joint active travel working group with a representative membership from both committees will be set up as a matter of urgency and will hold its first meeting before the end of this calendar year?
Tony.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Cook for his question? Councillor Gray and I would like to give an assurance to Council that active travel is at the heart of both our regeneration strategy and our responses to the climate emergency. Membership of the Members' Active Travel Working Group will be drawn from chair and spokespersons of the Economy, Regeneration and Development Committee and the chair and spokespersons of the Environment, Climate Emergency and Transport Committee. The first meeting of the Members' Active Travel Working Group will take place in November, and I personally look forward to working together with members of the group on this important cross-cutting theme. Thank you for the advance notice, Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much for your answer. Unless Councillor Gray would like to add anything as I ask the question to both chairs. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. I did actually say, as part of my answer, Councillor Gray and I would like to give an assurance.
I recognise that. I was just inviting Councillor Gray if she wished to add anything. That's all. Thank you.
You are entitled to have a supplementary question. So I don't know whether you've got anything you wish to add.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Nothing to answer. Right, thank you. Right, secondly, I would like to invite Councillor Stuart Kelly to put his question to Councillor Liz Gray.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So recently in my ward, a street bench was removed without notice or consultation. The bench was located in an area with a higher than average elderly population and in an area where many people have enjoyed walking during the summer and through the recent lockdowns. It provided a quiet service for people to be able to take a few minutes rest whilst walking. Its removal has annoyed many local people. The council has refused to replace it. I should like to ask how many other street benches in the borough have been removed without notice and not replaced.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Street benches are an important part of the highway infrastructure asset and are maintained accordingly. Limited resources are available for maintaining the council's benches, and wherever possible they are repaired and repainted in their location. When a bench becomes damaged beyond repair, unfortunately, it may need to be removed. In those cases, benches will be replaced with a new bench in the original location as soon as resources allow. No benches should be removed and not replaced at all. I believe this particular bench is being replaced relatively soon, so I thank you for raising this issue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, I don't wish to take advantage of the supplementary except to thank Councillor Gray for that most constructive reply. Thank you. It differs in so many ways to the reply I received from council officers.
Right. There being no other questions, we will now move to item 5. Matters requiring approval or consideration by the council, and we start with number A, which is Members' Allowance Scheme. This is a referral from the Constitution and Standards Committee meeting held on the 30th September 2021. I call on Councillor Phil Gilchrist to move the recommendation detailed in the report, and I call upon Councillor Paul Stewart to second that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise merely
Phil.
to... Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, may I just a comment I have to say that I overheard. I'm sure Councillor Spriggs didn't mean to say that, but said a storm in a teacup when one of the members of the public knocked over a cup. I'm just wondering if she would like to withdraw that remark.
Please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the agenda pack, there's an item on pages 3 to page 6 that draws attention to the work of the Constitution and Standards Committee. At this stage, we're asking the Council to note and agree to the payments to the Independent Remuneration Panel's member as part of the new scheme, and an allowance for the independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee. We have other work in progress, Mr Mayor, which will be reported back to Council through our committee when it meets later in the year too.
Thank you. I am not aware of any amendments, so I propose we move to the debate. Seconder.
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Paul. Do you want to speak now? Doesn't have to speak. Oh, right. Are there any speakers on this matter? No. Then I call upon Councillor Paul Stewart. You now have up to 3 minutes to speak to the motion.
I have nothing further to add to that, Mr Mayor. Just happy to second it.
Sorry, Councillor Gilchrist, you now have the right of reply and may address the Council for up to 3 minutes.
Happy to waive that, Mr Mayor. There's been no debate, no reply necessary. Just to ask members to support the motion before them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. There being no further comments, we will move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Okay, thanks, Phil. 5B, Capital Monitoring Report, Quarter 1, 2021-22. This is a referral from the Policy Resources Committee held on the 1st of September 21. I call on Councillor Jeanette Williamson to move the recommendation detailed in the report, and I call upon Councillor Yvonne Nolan to second it. As proposer,
So moved, Mr Mayor.
thank you. And proposer of the motion, Councillor Jeanette Williamson, you now have 5 minutes to speak to your motion.
I don't intend to speak to it, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I don't believe that was seconded by Councillor Nolan. I don't think she got a chance, but I do have an amendment once Councillor Nolan might want to second.
You have to
Second, Mr Mayor.
I thought I heard you, to be honest. Yeah. Okay.
Mr Mayor,
Right.
I would like to move an amendment to the capital programme to insert point 3. So Wirral Council notes that the Community Bank is not yet launched and no expenditure has been incurred. Given the anticipated external assurance reviews for the Capitalisation Directive, Council believes it is no longer appropriate to allocate £5 million to the Community Bank in the capital programme. Therefore, Council resolved to remove the following allocations from the programme: 185,000 in 21-22, 575,000 in 22-23, and 4,240,000 in 23-24. I have a copy here and I've submitted it to the Director of Law as well.
I'd take the opportunity to second that when, unless anybody wants to talk in between.
Okay. So we'll move to this now. Okay. Proposer of the motion is Tom and seconded by Leslie, yeah? Debate. We will now have a debate on the motion, amendment, and vote before we return to the original motion as amended or otherwise. Do any councillors wish to speak to the motion? Amendment. Can you stand up, please, folks? Just, it is awkward.
First of all, Mr Mayor, I had no notice of this amendment, but thinking about the issue...
Tom's going to speak to it now.
I'll speak.
Sorry, I'm just waiting to see if we had speakers. Tom, you have to speak now, please.
Okay, thanks, Mr Mayor. I hear some members opposite from a settled position saying there's no notice. Well, we had no notice last time on Vision Zero, but it was shared with some members. Mr Mayor, the amendment, I want to just talk on given the Council's financial situation and the request for Capitalisation Directive for Government, and I believe there's a time to assess our capital programme. To commit £5 million to a bank would not be in the interests of the council taxpayer and our local communities. We haven't physically got £5 million to commit, we would have to borrow it at a rough cost of £400,000. Seriously, Mr Mayor, we will borrow £5 million, give it away to a bank, and to lend it out, then to cost us £400,000. I can think of many more beneficial things that we can do. And I do understand the good, noble intentions behind this endeavour, but Wirral can't afford it now. It would be irresponsible. And when my group speaks to residents, the first thing they don't tell us is we should get involved in a bank. They tell us that they want the grass cut. They tell us how the borough is looking a mess. They tell us that they want They talk about the security of affording their own home to rent. Mr Mayor, £5 million would yield about 500 affordable homes for our residents. Mr Mayor, £5 million capital would do a lot of good for our communities. It's 2 million. It's 2 leisure centres. I wish it was 2 million. It's a So I think now's the time for the council to think again. We shouldn't be borrowing money off the government with one hand and then handing it to a bank with another. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've listened to the points raised. My initial response is this, that the money hasn't been borrowed and spent yet, because the bank and the work involved in it needs to be assessed by agencies involved in the banking service, circulating far above our heads somewhere, to do with deciding whether it is a reasonable proposition or not, or whether it can obey all the laws about banking, whether it gets the licences, I think, is what it needs. And so the council hasn't spent that yet. If members want to put other items with costs into the capital programme, they might move up when there is a regular assessment. But at this stage, the bank, as I last recall the discussion, hadn't appointed independent people to run it, hadn't, I think, completed the process of finding a director, but I'm happily be brought up to date on the issues. So it is in its early stages. And because it's in its early stages, we haven't actually been spending what's, as you say, resting in our account temporarily till we use it. And there will be many demands on our resources, but to suddenly spring something that members generally back, because the idea was that we would, first of all, deal with the disappearance of financial institutions, deal with the disappearance of local organisations that invest in Wirral. I wonder whether I need to declare an interest as somebody who has an account with a friendly society called My Community Bank, which has branches in London and Cheshire. So, but I think I'm sufficiently far away from that movement, because I had to be a member of the co-op and signed up to get into that. I think I'm sufficiently distant from that. The council has had various ways of trying to invest in the rural economy, of encourage people to look for local investments. I can remember the days when the late Councillor Jackson talked about getting a cash machine or hoping for a cash machine in the Seacombe area as they gradually got withdrawn and removed. He hoped the council would move into doing more things to support communities. At this stage, this is not yet developed, not taken off, but is there to help support ploughing money back into the rural economy, and it would be carefully managed according to the national rules about how banks should operate. So I'm not going for this move tonight, which I think is rather speculative and unfortunately doesn't quite understand where the situation really is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Williams.
Mr. Mayor, just on a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I know it's entirely in order for Councillor Anderson to move an amendment without notice, but is it entirely satisfactory for no members to see the written version of that? Well, you may wave at a piece of paper, Councillor, but I don't have the wording in front of me to be able to contribute to this debate as I would wish.
Mr. Mayor, would it be helpful if I read it out again? Or a break and it can be circulated? Read it out again. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So it's adding additional point 3. I'll sit down because the mic's easier. Wirral Council notes the Community Bank has not launched and no expenditure has been incurred. Given the anticipated external assurance review for the Capitalisation Directive, Council believes it is no longer appropriate to allocate £5 million to the Community Bank in the capital programme. Council therefore resolved to remove the following allocation from the programme: 185,000 in 21-22, 575,000 in 22-23, and 4,240,000 in 23-24.
Can I suggest we just take an adjournment for 5 minutes and we'll get paper copies of that printed off, sent out to everyone.
Well, guys.
Pat?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say a few words against the amendment as proposed. Mr. Mayor, we are often, as councillors, asked to address the stark inequalities across Wirral. And one of those inequalities is access to banking facilities, both for residents and for businesses, particularly new businesses, attempting to start up and provide much needed employment across Wirral. The community bank is a vital measure if we are to address those inequalities. So it's very, very important for those most marginalised people in our community who don't have a bank account and currently don't have access to finance, and also those businesses who are struggling to gain finance to grow their businesses. So I feel that it's also incredibly important for our community wealth building agenda, which we really need to build on, and the community bank, as proposed, is an incredibly important part of the community wealth building agenda. So, Mr. Mayor, in short, I and my group fully support the funds laid out in the medium-term financial plan to support the community bank. Most of those funds are not allocated until 3 years hence. We still have plenty of time to scrutinise and analyse the details as they come forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Stuart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am grateful for the brief adjournment, so I could see what was actually written on the piece of paper. Because I had heard what Councillor Anderson had said when he moved his amendment, and then I listened carefully to the speech that he then went on to make. And in my mind, there was sort of like a disjoint between what he had said in the amendment and what he had said in his speech, because in his speech he said, we don't need to borrow 5 million, we could cut the grass, we could build houses, we could do this, we could do the other, and a whole list of desirable things that piqued my interest. And saying, oh, here's free money that we can do all of these nice things with. But it didn't seem to tie in with what he said in the amendment. And now we have it in writing, it was waved at me earlier, here it is. And I've read it. And of course, Mr. Mayor, we can't do any of those things based on this. This doesn't have that effect at all. We can't cut a blade of grass if we pass this. We can't build a single house if we pass this. The effect that this has 21-22 is not to borrow capital in the sum of £185,000. There will be a revenue saving to that, very minute revenue saving. Maybe we could think of things to do with it. Maybe we could. However, the Director of Finance will take whatever that saving is and reduce the capitalisation directive by that amount. And to be perfectly honest, that amount, the interest on the revenue repayment on 185,000, you probably won't see in the roundings. It just won't be there. It's neither here nor there. Now, for future years, I hear entirely what Councillor Cleary says in defence of the project, and the fact that it has some more due diligence, etc., to go through. So it is in as an indicative amount for future years. And I hear what he says also about the potential benefit in terms of community wealth building, etc. And I personally would say, Mr. Mayor, that it will be a shame at this point to take this amount of money out of the capital programme before the due diligence is finished and before the actual benefits are placed before committee and members for them to analyse, just for the saving of a few £1,000s in revenue savings. But, Mr. Mayor, it is completely wrong, is it not, to move an amendment and then make a speech claiming that the effect of that amendment is X, Y and Z when it is not. That is why, whilst it is important, whilst it is entirely within the Constitution for amendments without notice to be moved, it is absolutely vital that we do have sight of what it actually says and don't necessarily trust what the Conservatives are saying it might do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've only got one thing to say about the comments that have been made, and that is this, that old saying, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. And whilst 185,000 might not sound very much in this particular year, I'm sure if you ask the Director of Finance, when she's got to look at saving millions, every 185,000 adds up. And it's not just 185,000 this year. If you commit yourself to that this year, you're committing yourself to £5 million up until 23-24. And if anybody thinks here they can go to our constituents and say that we're happy to have a bank and pay £5 million and the rest between now and 2024, you go ahead and do it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I think it says something really about Tory women on this side, because Councillor Cathy Hodson's just probably stolen all that I wanted to say about this. But it's great to think that at least we all think along the same lines. But to have £5 million, Mr Mayor, earmarked within the council's budgets, now up until 2024 seems to me at the moment to be completely foolhardy. And I think if you ask local residents their opinion on this, undoubtedly, the people that I represent, and I'm sure many other people would say, well, we hear about the council being strapped for cash. This clearly is something that the council should not be doing. Have the council surveyors absolutely lost the way on this? And I think that's what we have done, Mr Mayor. Perhaps we've got a little bit above ourselves. It would be lovely if we could have a community bank, because I think it was Councillor Gilchrist or perhaps somebody down that end before mentioned the fact that they remember Councillor, the former councillor leader of the council, remind me of his name, please. Thank you, Dave Jackson, who obviously represented Seacombe when he said that there wasn't anywhere for his residents in Seacombe to even have a cash till. And that is dreadful. And instances like that where people are deprived of being able to get easy access to cash clearly should not prevail. But Mr Mayor, we are a council strapped for cash. We're still yet to see what the government people who have come in to have a look at the finances of this council are going to say about our capital directive. We hope we're going to be successful. But really, Mr Mayor, at this particular time, I'm afraid all the problems do outweigh any benefits that may come with it. And as I say, £5 million in the council coffers up until 2024 seems absolutely ridiculous. Phrases like, you know, running and whelk stalls would spring to mind of many of the residents that I speak to, because they say, goodness me, you know, the council's in such a mess. And Councillor, my colleague here, Councillor Anderson, did mention things that we could do, but as far as the public is concerned, they see at the moment, through all sorts of reasons, that some of their bins aren't being emptied, the grass isn't being cut, they can't get trees felled, they can't get pavements mended, and it just looks to local residents that this is completely foolhardy. So I'm delighted, Mr Mayor, to be able to second this, and I do hope that the rest of the council will join Councillor Anderson and I in actually putting this matter to bed once and for all. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Right to reply. Tom? Sorry?
I don't wish to speak, but I wish to draw council's attention to what the recommendation in the minute actually is, which is about the capital programme for 2021-22.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. You know, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Rennie said, and, you know, Stuart was a bit disingenuous there. It was good rhetoric and got people cheering, but I was actually pointing out what political choices we can have with £5 million. It's entirely up to council or P&R to decide.
Tom, very sorry. I've got it wrong. You don't have a right to reply.
An amendment?
According to the Director Law.
If I may, Mr Mayor, on an amendment, the right of reply is to the mover of the original motion, not to the mover of the amendment.
Sorry.
So it's Councillor Williamson who has the right of reply.
I'll send everyone a written response then, shall I?
Right. So, Jeanette, you've got the right to
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So basically, Stuart and Pat and Phil have already said what I wanted to say, so I'm not going to go over what they've said. It's a very good trick, Tom, to conflate two issues, isn't it, and to reel off a list of things that the council should be doing as opposed to this. And you often quote residents who you say have never expressed an interest in a bank. And I'm not saying that that's not correct, they probably haven't, but my residents who are in serious poverty, who can't get bank accounts, who are financially excluded, very much supportive of it. So I guess that's down to just different conversations with our residents, isn't it? Now, this council's underpinning the Wirral plan is a reduction in inequalities, and that is what the bank seeks to do. I appreciate what you're saying about cutting grass and emptying bins, although I have to say also that the problem with emptying bins cannot be related to small borrowing costs for the due diligence to be done, which is just over £180,000. But as a council, we have to have ambitions, and those ambitions have to reach further than grass cutting, which is business as usual and should be done. But we have to also look further than that and have ambitions for our residents too. And that does include tackling the decline of the High Street Bank in high streets. Liscard's seen 2 high street banks close in as many months. And I've got loads of residents coming to me who have got to travel miles to a bank. And it's just not feasible. I've got residents who can't open bank accounts because of their situation. And latest statistics show that the poverty premium costs people without a bank account nearly £500 a year. And they're the people who can least afford to pay more for the utilities, are doing so because they're financially excluded. The community bank addresses all those issues that we care about as a council and that underpin the Wirral plan. And as I say, the borrowing costs will be on the £185,000. That's for this year. And I do think that as a council, we should be having wider aspirations to tackle inequalities in the borough other than warm words on paper. So obviously I'm not going to support your amendment tonight. Thank you.
So without further ado, we now take a vote on the amendment. No, please. And so all those in favour of the amendment, please show. Okay. All those against? Abstentions? The results: votes in favour 23, votes against 41. That is lodged. Thank you. Right. So, Jeanette, we're now going to go back to your good self, and you have now 5 minutes to speak to the motion.
I don't intend to do that, Mr. Mayor.
No, I think you would. Right, okay. So we've done all that, are there any further speakers? Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, since I didn't get the right to reply, I'll just make a few comments now. I was saying to Councillor Kelly, I won't give you a written response. I'll do you the courtesy of giving you a response here. But you can self-aggrandise all Stuart, but actually it is about choices. It's about political choices. £5 million of capital can achieve a lot in our communities, and it's how we set... Oh, for goodness
Point of order, please, Mr Mayor.
Is it a point of order?
Yeah. Have we not just had a vote on an amendment? And why should members have a...
Mr Mayor, I'll carry on if you don't mind. I think it's a spurious point of order. So, I know Councillor Whittingham likes to jump up and try and shut me up every time, but, it's not going to work. I'll carry on. So, on the capital programme, I'm making a point. I actually don't agree with what's in there at the moment. I've moved an amendment, but there is political choices there. And when MHALG, we're going to them for an assurance review, asking them for a capital directive and asked to look at every penny of the council finances, and then we're borrowing £5 million to give to a bank. And I understand the noble principles behind some of it. I don't agree with the outcomes, I have to say. I completely support community wealth building, but what the parties opposite are doing is conflating the two. What you don't do is get community wealth building by doing a glorified credit union where others have failed. What you do is local skills, jobs, training, support, that going to local suppliers. That's how you build community wealth building. And I have to say, and it's the council, the group opposite, and I won't name any names, I won't be personal here, but has got a lot to answer for in terms of their pet projects. The Hoylake Golf Resort, they wanted to loan 26 million. There's also an exempt item from 2017 that I won't mention, that where we put money into a single-purpose vehicle that might have gone down under. We don't know at the moment. And we've got now another record of putting £5 million into another organisation. It's not the right time. It's really the wrong thing to do. That money can be spent doing other good things in the borough if you want to spend it at all, or to reduce the capitalisation directive. So we're not looking at cutting Europa, the Williamson, next March, and I think it's a shame that you didn't take that opportunity tonight.
Councillor Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the Conservative group need a lesson on what a community bank actually is. So small, medium-sized enterprises and financially disadvantaged people aren't well served by the present banking system. And this is what the community bank has been set up for, to encourage lending to small businesses, which aren't well served. A micro business cannot, the number of bank branches has been closed. It's very difficult for someone who wants to set up a small business to actually meet a bank manager or speak to a business advisor. There's lots of people who can't open a bank account. This. What was that?
We please come through the mayor.
So I think
Sorry.
The party opposites, they need to take some lessons. So it's all right going to your little communities. They're all well off and got their nice little bank accounts and the pensions in the back pockets. You want to start thinking about the less well off people in this country. Absolutely disgusting.
Mr Mayor, that's got to be one of the most ludicrous statements, and I would ask him to retract that. Let's be absolutely honest here. Upton has got some of the most lucrative areas in the entire borough, right? And he needs to retract that. It's completely wrong. All of our wards have different economic and socio backgrounds, right? It's completely wrong.
Mr Mayor, I live in a council estate.
Come on, please. Thank you. Any other speakers? David Burgess Joyce.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wasn't intending to speak. I must confess, I do actually support the best of intentions of the party opposite in what they're trying to do. And I do understand fully that we do have a situation where some people don't have bank accounts, and we want to be supportive. My concern and my question, Mr Mayor, is do we still have the business card of the QC that helped us to formulate the payout for the Hoylake Golf Resort? Because my concern is that we're not competent and we'll be here in 5 years' time embarrassed in front of the Banking Commission because we'll have cocked up yet again by having a vanity project which yet again lets down council taxpayers on the Wirral. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, I have to address that. We won't be, well I do actually, Jeff. Sorry, there's been something said that's inaccurate. I've had me right to reply. It's a point of order. We have to apply for a banking licence, and only once those conditions are satisfied will we be given the green light. So we won't be here in 5 years' time before anyone. So we'll either get the banking licence or we won't. And that is a very lengthy, complex and very thorough affair.
Ian?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Caribbean? Mr Mayor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
No, Mr Mayor. Thank you. That's okay, thanks. Right, I'm at the back near the departure lounge, it's fine. Mr Mayor, I wasn't going to speak, and everybody says that, but I do feel that we've heard from what the Leader of the Council said. We've heard from a very eloquent speech from Councillor Brain about his colleague that we've missed. We've heard from Councillor Anderson and others about the need for more civility and debate. I do feel, Stuart, and I say this with the best of intentions, Stuart, I think your comments were out of order, and I think it lowered the tone of the debate. We don't want to play deprivation bingo, Stuart. I was brought up in a cold, damp, rented house in Huyton under a Labour council. We don't want to go down that route. We're about doing the best for the borough. Can you please withdraw your comments? I find them quite offensive.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just going to make a plea again. I've done this before in council where I wish councillors would actually look at what a point of order actually is. Because people keep jumping out of the seat shouting point of order, and they're not points of order. So could you, Mr McCourt, possibly tell us again how to do a point of order?
Members, with the Mayor's permission, very briefly, a point of order is listed in the standing orders. It is a point of procedural error on the part of the council that is being pointed out by the member concerned. I would encourage members, we did a training session on this that's on our web pages. Have a look. Obviously, if members would like a further session, we can do that again.
Thank you.
To the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, yes. I think everyone can hear. Shaft if they don't. I'm very happy to second this motion, but I do thank Councillor Anderson for his lesson about what community wealth building is all about, despite the fact it was somewhat unnecessary. Kind of you to offer. But I think this side of the chamber is very well aware of what community wealth building is about. And it's certainly something that we're all committed to as a party, and I did believe that we were committed to as a council. Certainly we had so far. Those were the commitments that we'd made. It's interesting, you talk about it being about political choices. It absolutely is about political choices. And it's about the political choice that we make to support and to change the lives of people who are suffering from inequalities in this borough. And we know that that's massive. Not just here, but having been told that there are political choices to be made, which is things that we've been hearing in the last couple of weeks, most certainly from our government, about who are quite happy to cut universal credit to exactly to the same people who are in need of the support from a community bank, but clearly quite happy to make choices to make those kind of cuts to the people in the greatest need and the people suffering the most inequalities, both in terms of financial standards, in terms of housing, education, health, right across the borough. And yet, what you do is you trot out what you believe to be community wealth building, which is what I've heard your government trot out in answer to what are you going to do about cutting £20 a week? Oh, we're going to give people more skills. Oh, we're going to raise wages. How on earth are you going to do that? And where have we seen the evidence of any wages being raised? We see people struggling on the minimum wages. We see jobs being created on 0 hours contracts, all of which has grown
under the Conservative government. Please don't shout at me, Councillor Cox. There's absolutely no need for it. Councillor Cox, I didn't shout at you when you were speaking, whether I agreed with you or not. So I'm very pleased to second this motion, which actually is the simplest thing in the world. It's just approving our capital programme. And I have to say, Councillor Anderson, I think you took a chance there to try to make policy on the hoof. That's not how we do it. If you want to make policy, I know you've written about it, and I know you wrote it down, but it's still on the hoof. If you want to change policy, Councillor Anderson, are you going to let me speak, or are you going to try and speak over me? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we want to change this council's policy, there are places to do that. You do it through the public committee system and then bring it here. You don't just invent an amendment to approving the minutes for the capital programme. So on that basis, I am very happy to support the approval of the capital programme as it stands. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Williamson, you now have the right of reply and may address the council for up to 3 minutes.
Have I not had the right to reply?
Councillor Williamson, you had a right to reply to the amendment. Now you have a right to reply to the entire debate.
There you go. Some things are unfair, Tom, and this is one of them, isn't it? Well, just like your amendment was really made up. I'm not going to go over old ground. You know, Yvonne's quite right. I think your party's concept of community wealth building is way off the mark. And we did all approve the community wealth building strategy at P&R. Not only approved it, but all fully supported it, and for the right reasons. So Community Bank fits right smack bang in the middle of that strategy, and that's all I'm going to say, Mr. Mayor.
We now move, with there being no further comments, we will now move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Hey?
You're not going to vote against your own thing.
It's ours. Thank you. Yay. Right. All those against? That's a full house. Is Wirral, thank you, Jeff. Wirral Youth Justice Service Strategic Plan 2021-2022. This is a referral from the Children's, Young People's and Education Committee held on the 13th of September 2021. I call on Councillor Wendy Clements to move the recommendations detailed in the report, and I call on Councillor Kate Cannon to second the proposal. So
moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed.
So
Councillor
seconded,
Clements.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Clements, you now have 5 minutes to speak to your motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'm really happy to move this strategic plan for Council's approval. It came with the endorsement of the Children, Young People and Education Committee. This is an annual plan which is linked to the terms and conditions of the Youth Justice Board Grant Award, and it's important to note that it links in with the Wirral plan, so recently approved by Council. And this plan is to bring about change for our young people and their families, so that they can contribute fully to society and live a brighter future in safe and pleasant communities. It's for our young people to be treated fairly by the youth justice system and receive help that recognises their individual needs builds on their strengths through statutory work or preventive support. For our young people who are involved in or on the cusp of the criminal justice system, it's for them to be seen as children first and offenders second. I so move, Mr. Mayor.
I'm not aware of any amendments, so I will move to the debate. Anyone wishing to speak? No? Oh? No? Thank you. So we move to... Yeah, Councillor Cannon as the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to second this evening, and I'd like the council to also note the excellent work that our youth justice team undertake on a daily basis on Wirral for our children and young people. It's due to their dedication and the vision that I want to second this motion tonight, and I ask you to take time out of your day to read this strategic plan and all of the positives that are in there, and especially the positive feedback from our young people, because they are the people who use this service, and they're the ones whose voice we want to hear the most. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Clements, you now have the right of reply and may address the council for up to 3 minutes. You okay? Thanks, Mandy. Further. Oh, it doesn't come on again. Thank you. I think it's a flops. Yeah. All those against? Yeah, flops. Thank you. We now move to item 6, which is the reports and recommendations from council committees for consideration. This decision taken since the last council meeting. So since the last council meeting to tonight, 45-minute time limit, no questions will exceed 1 minute and no answer will exceed 2 minutes. Members are asked to receive the minutes of the committee meetings listed on the summons, and this is now also the opportunity to ask questions of committee chairs. I'm not aware of any questions being asked in advance of the meeting, and I do not intend to read through each meeting individually, but will instead refer to this item en bloc. So I would therefore ask members that if they do have a question, they make reference to the committee and the minute number that they wish their question relating to. So do members have any questions? Right. Stuart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Concerning Tourism, Communities, Culture and Leisure Committee, minute 27 from the meeting on the 2nd of September, update on progress and future development of Wirral Museum Service. Mr. Mayor, my question is, a constituent has written to me to tell me how much regular visitors to the Williamson Art Gallery and Museum are missing Sunday opening. She goes on to suggest that to remove a cultural experience on a day when families can easily access it makes no sense, and hopes that we will soon return to Sunday openings. Mr. Mayor, during the budget setting process, we were told the hours of operation would include Sunday opening. So on behalf of my constituent, can I ask the chair of the committee, when will we be opening the Williamson on a Sunday again?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, for your question. Thank you, Councillor Kelly, for your question on behalf of your residents. You may know that we've had a lot of difficulties with such a beautiful building such as the Williamson. It will need some further work. We have already done some remedial work on to allow larger groups in. Unfortunately, you may know there are hospitality staff issues around, so we haven't been able to also open the cafe.
It is a frustrating but a gradual process to try to get back to full hours, and I will ask officers to try to relook at a Sunday and try to make sure that's open, because we're also trying to facilitate more user groups to be able to put on their exhibitions and use the spaces, because some of those are also dependent on funding streams and use the space. So I shall take that back to officers and we'll try and get a response to you.
Councillor Azureni.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is to Councillor Yvonne Nolan. Yvonne, in your capacity as of Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and at the meeting on, I think it was the 20th of July of this year, minutes 16 refers, apparently the update report regarding the integrated care systems and the integrated care partnership developments. Within that, it stated that the role of the Health and Wellbeing Committee would be significant, which clearly I would agree with, and in fact that Wirral had a strong case for more services to be commissioned at place, given the existing pool funding arrangements. Is that something, Councillor Nolan, that you would agree with?
Thank you, Councillor Annie, for your question. Yes, it is something that I agree with, and it's something that we're currently attempting to maximise the ability of the Health and Wellbeing Board to be as involved as possible, because that is the route. I mean, I'm aware that we have a notice of motion on this later, but the Health and Wellbeing Board is the main route for retaining the local democratic accountability. It's the one route where we will have elected members involved. And so it's really, really important. We hope that the Health and Wellbeing Board will be able to play a very significant role as part of the local partnership, which is currently being discussed, and the development of it is being worked on by ourselves, our health partners, and officers from both health and from social care, and also from the voluntary sector. So it's most certainly our intention to ensure that we meet the requirements of Cheshire and Merseyside Integrated Care Board, that it is considered that we will receive full control of the local budget at place, which will enable our provider collaborative to determine what services will be offered here on Wirral, because it's very much something that we want, rather than our services being commissioned regionally by Cheshire and Merseyside. Thank you.
Thank you for a full answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for the Chair of the Children, Young People's and Education Committee, Councillor Clements. I'm referring to the appendix, the report on youth justice strategy, pages 13 to 15. As a member of the Howard League for Penal Reform, I welcome the progress in Wirral to reduce the number of young people entering the criminal justice system for the first time. Strong statistical evidence demonstrates that young people dealt with by the police are more likely, not less likely, to be involved in crime and imprisoned later in life. The figures cited in all the reports for young people entering the justice system for the first time, youth custody and reoffending rates, show progress from 2018 to 2019. We're now in late 2021. When will the figures for 2020 be available? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Cook for the advance notice of his question, and I'm happy to be able to answer it for you tonight. As Councillor Cook may recall, when we had our committee meeting, the data that he refers to on page 13 to 15 is actually drawn from national data produced by the Youth Justice Board and the Ministry of Justice. It was the most recent data set at the point that that strategic plan was produced. The next set of data will be published by the Youth Justice Board in December 2021, and that will give us data for December 2020. And I'm pleased to say that the performance reports that the committee is going to receive from now on, as you know, we had our first of those at the last meeting, that's going to contain those figures. So we will have the most up-to-date available figures for us. And our Youth Justice Board do a splendid job, as Councillor Cannon referred to earlier, and I know you agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Ivan Camfo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Councillor Yvonne Nolan, Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. At its meeting on the 16th of June 2021, Minute 6 refers to the Integrated Care System Project Update, stated that the Health and Wellbeing Board would play a critical role in driving local arrangements. So in particular, in view of motion 1 on tonight's agenda, does the Chair agree with this statement? Or if she doesn't, what plans does she have to ensure that Health and Wellbeing Board plays a critical role? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Camphor. Yes, I do agree with the statement, and I think I've outlined to Councillor Rennie the role that I see for the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's the motion tonight, the notice of motion 1 refers to the Health and Social Care Act and the overarching national changes that are being brought about. The work that we're doing locally is clear from the minutes of the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's certainly a role that we intend to continue, and certainly I will be happy to speak more about it during the debate on that notice of motion. But your question was, do I agree with the statement that the Health and Wellbeing Board will be important in driving that forward? And absolutely, I do agree with it.
Are there any further questions? Yes.
That's the chap at the Harry Gorman, is it? Harry Gorman.
Harry Gorman. Councillor Gorman.
Oh, yeah. This question is for the Chair of the Housing Committee. I very much welcome the Council's participation in the resettlement programme for Afghan refugees. I hope that going forward we will continue to play our full part in assisting those who need our support. It is of course vital that all refugees have adequate assistance and secure housing. Will the Chair of the Housing Committee consider and support a report being brought to the committee in the near future so that members can be advised and seek assurances that refugees in Wirral are being appropriately housed and supported? Thank you.
Just before we answer that one, the Housing Committee have not met in the last month. Unfortunately, they've been put back, so therefore it will have to go over to the next meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I am happy to answer the question if need be. No, but I have been given advance notice.
Treat it as a question from earlier. So treat it as a question from earlier. We'll take it for the question from now. Sorry, yeah. Take it for the question. Go on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I appreciate that there wasn't a meeting. Thank you, Councillor Gorman, for advising me of your question in advance. And I do welcome your acknowledgement of the importance of Wirral participating in the Afghan programme and other resettlement programmes where we've already welcomed 134 people into our borough and our communities. I would refer you to the briefing that was shared with all councillors on the 23rd of September, which summarises Wirral's pledge to accept 12 individuals under the government's Afghan relocations and assistance policy. Officers will work with the Home Office to ensure a smooth transition for families and work alongside voluntary and faith sector to ensure that wraparound support is given to these families. Details of further Afghan resettlement programme scheme has yet to be announced, and I'm happy to consider a report to committee which we can discuss at our next party spokes meeting with regards to timing of that committee. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd just like to say congratulations to Councillor Harry Gorman on his maiden speech tonight, so thank you very much indeed for that as well. Yes, Councillor Martin.
Mr Mayor, thank you. My question is to Councillor Yvonne Nolan in her role as the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. At its meeting on the 31st of March this year, minute 4 refers. It states the Health and Wellbeing Board taking on a key leadership role in driving forward the new cohesive approach as the formal Integrated Care Partnership Board. I ask, bearing in mind the first motion on tonight's agenda, does the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board agree with these minutes? Or, if she doesn't, why hasn't she brought this to the Board's attention in subsequent meetings?
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mountney, for your question.
I feel like headmistress or something like that. Except I do want to raise another point of order. I would have thought the questions, given that we're looking at decisions taken at the most recent committees, the questions should have been asked about minutes of those meetings, not ones that took place in March or June, which has been the case in the last two lots of questions.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Just to correct Councillor McLaughlin, these minutes didn't go to any council. These are the latest minutes that have come. So it must be a procedural error. But the ones that, that you're seeing tonight didn't go to any council. So it's the first time they've come here. And that's why they are on the agenda. So if you look at the agenda, they are as minutes being referred. So I'm sure they're entitled to be questions.
Continue, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mountney. Yes, I do agree with the minutes. So in the same way that I have said to both of your previous questioners, I do agree with the minutes, and that would explain why I haven't brought it to the attention of the board. Thank you.
Uh, 6B, joint arrangements and external organisations. No reports or questions have been received in advance of the meeting. Notices, sorry, that's it, yeah, there. Notices of motions. So, councillors, we are now moved to item 7 on the agenda, and the council is invited to consider the following motions, which have been submitted in accordance with Standing Order 13. And motion 1 is oppose integrated care systems in the English NHS. I now invite Councillors Brian Kenny, Kate Cannon to move and second their motion, which is included in the council summons.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
So seconded, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Proposer of the motion, Councillor Kenny, you now have 5 minutes to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, while attention is quite rightly on the pandemic in this country, the NHS in England is being rapidly reorganised into 42 regional integrated care systems, IC systems. This will strengthen the role of private companies, including US health insurance corporations and suppliers, in clinical services and management of the NHS. IC systems will mean more private contracts, more downskilling and outsourcing of NHS jobs, reduced services and significant spending cuts. The bill is based on NHS England proposals derived from a US model which aims to spend less money on care. The Health and Care Bill will remove the statutory duty to provide NHS hospital care for everyone present in an area. It will end the requirement for social care needs assessments before a patient is discharged. NHS England has accredited over 200 corporations and businesses, at least 30 of them being US owned, to help develop ICSs. The Integrated Care Board, ICB, will actually sideline local authorities, threatening the future integrity of social care and reducing local accountability to elected councillors, let alone patients and NHS staff. NHS providers will be bound to a plan written by the ICB and to financial controls linked to that plan. The annual budgets will be based on area-wide targets rather than providing the care needed by the individuals who actually live there. Such local funding levels could threaten national agreements on issues such as staff wages, terms and conditions. Local variations in pay could lead staff to leave areas where funding is cut, further reducing care in that particular area. Procurement will be deregulated, eliminating safeguards for compliance with environmental, social and labour laws, and the ability to reject bidders with poor records, opening the door to cronyism and corruption. Mr Mayor, integrated care systems threaten patient care, jobs, pay, working conditions and the integrity of the NHS as a public service. And I submit that as a council we must oppose them. It's time to restore the NHS to a fully accountable, publicly run service, free to all at the point of use. We need a separate, collaborative, publicly funded social care service. Genuine integration based on the wider determinants of health, such as housing, employment and the environment, and involves more input from local authorities, not less. Mr Mayor, we must highlight these threats to the NHS and social care at every opportunity. We must call for maximum opposition to the Health and Care Bill 2021 and a halt to the rollout of IC systems. An extended and meaningful consultation with the public and Parliament to decide how health and social cares are provided in England are necessary. The introduction of legislation to bring about a universal, comprehensive and publicly provided NHS free at the point of use and fit for the 21st century. Mr Mayor, this motion calls for the Council, Chief Executive and Leader to write to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to seek assurances on this whole vital issue, with an immediate halt to the rollout of ICs until proper consultation has taken place. So I now urge Mr Mayor, this Council, to support the motion, including, I might add, the amendment put forward by the Lib Dem group, which we regard as a friendly amendment. So we're happy for the Lib Dem amendments to be incorporated into the substantive motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, let me just clarify. Phil, you've now agreed to support, so there's no amendment to it now, basically.
I'm happy that the amendment is to be incorporated, Mr Mayor.
Incorporated.
I'd like to speak when you call me.
Absolutely, no problem at all. Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Do you know what, I have to say, I really do like Brian Kenny. He's such a good soldier and will fight the good fight, whatever's given to him. But I'm really disappointed that the Labour group are using council these notice of motions to regurgitate the internal CLP dogma. We saw it at the last council when Councillor Falkesbury read a motion that Labour MP spoke about in Westminster Hall on planning reforms. And tonight, Mr Mayor, tonight, Mr Mayor, I can inform council that the notice of motion before us is really not the brainchild of Councillor Kenny or Cannon, but it is a rehash of a model motion for Labour branches and CLPs from the organisation Keep Our NHS Public. And so some might say, well, what's wrong with that if we believe it? I say there's nothing wrong with this if you do genuinely believe that the motion laid down before you tonight. But, Mr Mayor, actions speak louder than words. And the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board truly didn't believe setting up an integrated care system wouldn't work for several years. Why was she a key player in the creation of the Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership? And why does the former chief executive of that partnership, and these are his words, Mr Mayor, not mine, say, Greater Manchester remains the only real example of NHS and local government coming together as a truly equal partnership, where the important decisions are taken together, and it is the only place that resolved the fracture of the 1948 NHS settlement that separated local health services
from local democracy. So, Mr Mayor, if it's okay for residents in Greater Manchester, why isn't it okay for residents of Wirral? Do Labour councillors not in support of these? Or are they beholden to political dogma to stop our residents benefiting from a Cheshire and Merseyside health and care partnership? And what does that Cheshire and Merseyside health partnership say? What they want to do for our residents? Because all the political posturing from the group opposite is going to risk Wirral's relationship with this partnership. The Cheshire and Wirral partnership want to work together to to tackle health inequalities and improve the lives of the poorest fastest. And again, Mr Mayor, that's a vision statement from the Cheshire Partnership, which Labour want to stop. Mr Mayor, to conclude, this issue is far too important to play politics with. And I have to say, given the vast knowledge and experience of the Chair and Health and Wellbeing Board and her unique expertise in what she did in Greater Manchester, I genuinely believe that here in Wirral, working together, we can make a great success of the Cheshire and Merseyside Health Partnership. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mona McLaughlin.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Those of us who've been involved in health and social care for some time will no doubt recognise the interdependence of the two systems. One system will fail if the other one is struggling, and therefore we will almost certainly support plans to bring the two systems closer together, with both funded to an adequate level. A fully integrated service may be the goal in the future, but much more needs to be done to prepare for it than these plans allow for. Social care has made great strides in the last 40 years. Then, having care needs met with the preserve of the wealthy, and those without means were confined to long-stay hospital wards. But there is still some way to go yet to bring it to the position of the NHS, with care free at the point of need and not dependent on a person's ability to pay. And that is what makes the NHS so precious. Having to pay for healthcare and the prospect of profit being made from the delivery of it at a time of need is an anathema to most people. So a closer level of cooperation with more joined up systems which are supported by adequate funding and which allows for those with health and or care needs to access those services when they need them and is not dependent on a person's ability to pay is the aspiration. And having established the aspiration is, the question is, will the government plans in the form presented in the ICS plans, and for that matter on the future of funding social care, meet that aspiration? Well, for me, the answer is almost certainly no. They are not even a significant step towards it. The ICS plans are heavy on bureaucracy, vague on delivery plans, and light on accountability. In recent years, we have been supplied with a lot of information from various sources, of which some is accurate, some is speculation, and on occasion, some is either a distortion or inaccurate. And the Labour notice of motion does contain some speculation, but the fact that there is scope for such speculation because of the lack of clarity is in itself of how flawed the plans are. And I welcome the Liberal Democrat amendment because it brings more detail and direction to the actions required. There is so little clarity in the plans that the level of risk involved proceeding at stage is high, and our NHS is too precious for that risk to be taken. There is also a probability in the plans that social care will continue to be the poor relation. And there's certainly insufficient scope for democratic input and accountability. Too much is left to trust in the government, and do we really have that level of trust in Boris Johnson and his government to protect this precious NHS jewel and our much-needed care services? Given his record and his recent performance, which was more that of a stand-up comic than the leader of a country in crisis, and was his response to the very real and pressing problems faced by ordinary people, the answer must be no. We can't trust his values, but we can't trust his competence either. These plans are still underdeveloped. Before ploughing ahead at speed, there needs to be a lot more consultation, a proper response to those concerns being raised, more safeguards in place, and more detailed explanation of how they will develop and work in practice so that what we value is protected. I would have been supporting the Labour note of motion, but I do welcome the more detailed Liberal Democrat amendment and to bring more clarity and direction to what is needed. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Next speaker is Ivan Camvu, and can I say this is Ivan's maiden speech? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We should all take a moment to acknowledge the profound gratitude to the healthcare system in England, in the NHS, the local authorities, and in the voluntary organisations. Their extraordinary efforts to manage the COVID-19 and deliver a world-class vaccination programme while still continuing to provide essential services. The ambitions of the NHS long-term plan are the main focus for this government. It is therefore imperative that our national commitment to collaborative action, along with the agility and pace in decision-making characterised in our joint response to the pandemic, is fundamental to the drive to reform the much-needed reform needed for health and social care system in England. This means seizing the opportunity to remove barriers to integrated care and creating the fertile conditions necessary for local partnerships at place and elsewhere to thrive. So what does this mean? Improving outcomes in population health and healthcare, tackling inequalities in outcomes, experiences and access, enhance productivity with social and economic development. Mr. Mayor, the ICS development is firmly rooted in the principles of subsidiarity and collaboration at national and local levels, with flexibility for partnership at place, to achieve national standards and reduce inequalities, as in decisions taken closer to and in consultation with communities, collaboration between partners in place and at scale, local flexibility enabled by common digital capabilities and coordinated flow of data. Strong place-based partnerships in between NHS, local council, voluntary organisations and local residents are fundamental to the overall success of the integrated care system. We all know the issues affecting our local communities, such as the lack of mental health services, including under 18s, poor ADHD service across Wirral, the dysfunctional musculoskeletal service across Wirral, and of course, the much-touted issue of access to general practice. There are many more services which need reform to improve health inequalities and life expectancies for the residents of Wirral. Mr. Mayor, the bill gives us a unique and a real-time opportunity to be the voice for our constituents, to help influence as a council the services our communities so desperately require. So let us embrace this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work with our partners in the NHS, the voluntary sector and public health to improve the health outcomes our communities so richly deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Camphor on his maiden speech. I judge that Councillor Camphor is very used to talking to people warmly, enthusiastically, and takes a major part in the health service, so I bow to his knowledge on many issues. Where I have concerns about is the system that we're entering and how it's going to work. I know Councillor Camphor talked about embracing it. I am cautious about this embrace because I want to see what the embrace actually means. And I'd say to members, I wouldn't be here tonight if the doctor hadn't phoned me at 8:05 in the morning and said go to A&E. I wouldn't be here tonight if I hadn't spent almost 3 days in A&E. And I wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing tonight, not that I'm doing very well, but I wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing tonight had not the expertise of our part last Friday given me lenses to wear in my glasses that change what I can see so I can actually see what I'm seeing, if that makes sense. But what I see in the Health and Care Bill is something like 135 clauses. What I see in the Health and Care Bill is a lot of powers reserved to the Secretary of State. And what I know was a rustle before about clause 78 when the talk of Councillor Kenny referred to discharges. Age concern in their evidence to the Health and Social Care Committee wanted to ensure that the standards of care older people can expect are clearly articulated and no one falls through the gaps which is surely one of the things. Now, there's a lot of suspicion about this legislation, this bill, which started with Mr. Hancock. Many organisations have looked at it, and often we're told by Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, that we've seen complicated workarounds needed to help the NHS and local government work together. He also went on the 14th of July, we recognise there are limits to how far this can go under the current law. Mr. Mayor, the law can be arranged and adjusted without such a huge bill. I looked at the editorial in the British Medical Journal, which said that existing requirements to competitively tender some clinical services will be scrapped, although what will replace them is unclear. I looked at the briefing by the King's Fund, who said a reduced focus on competition between providers is welcome. However, many areas, including non-clinical services, will remain within the scope of existing procurement processes. And again, the King's Fund said, as it stands, the bill will give the Secretary of State sweeping powers to intervene in earlier decisions about changes to local services. So, Mr. Mayor, it's proceed with caution. If I was a train driver, I would not be looking at a green light and heading right down the track. I'd be proceeding with caution. And I'm especially cautious as our local ICS is having such difficulty recruiting a chair. So I'm cautious because the council wants to get the best deal for Wirral, and the mechanisms need to be in place for that, which is the purpose of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And the next speaker is Councillor Daisy Kenny, and again, she's making her maiden speech. Over to you, Daisy.
Thank you. One of my pledges to the residents of Biscard and Egremont was to defend our NHS, and that's what I intend to do here tonight. The reason I and many others are so proud of the principle of our NHS is that no matter who you are or where you come from, you receive world-class healthcare free at the point of need. But this will likely not be the case for much longer. Our precious National Health Service is being privatised piece by piece. Of course, it is done in stealth. It is not obvious to the public. For example, often an NHS logo is used by a private company with the small print providing NHS services underneath. This motion tonight is about the Health and Care Bill, which is currently at committee stage in Parliament. The bill proposes integrated care systems, which sounds positive, but it should be called the disintegrated care systems, as it involves breaking our National Health Service into 42 separate systems, creating a postcode lottery for healthcare. These systems will have autonomy and they will have decision-making boards. Private companies can sit on these boards and make decisions about budgets and contracts. This is a direct conflict of interest. Furthermore, there would be budgetary pressures on these systems, and that will result in a race to the bottom. It is based on an American system putting corporation profits before our patients. The Health and Care Bill invites vultures to swoop in and profit from the disintegration of our NHS. I urge councillors to support this motion to oppose integrated care systems. This motion calls for the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to have a meaningful consultation with the public, rather than sneaking this through during a pandemic without public consultation. I also urge anyone listening who cares about our NHS to join the Kill the Bill campaign, sign up to defend our NHS, and I encourage everyone across the country to write to their MPs and to oppose this bill. Because if we do not fight for our NHS, the horror stories that we hear of people spiralling in debt due to healthcare costs won't be stories that we hear about people in America. It will be me and you. It will be us. Thank you.
Next speaker is Councillor Yvonne Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, may I congratulate Councillor Camphor, Councillor Gorman and Councillor Kenny on their maiden speeches. Can I also say to Councillor Gilchrist, this did not start with Matt Hancock. this started a long time ago. This has been long in the planning. It's a cynical strategy for breaking up the NHS and allowing private companies in. Started with Simon Stevens, now Lord Stevens, when he returned from his sojourn for 10 years in United Healthcare in the United States and came back with a plan that looks very, very similar to that of the United States. And I will come back to that. When Councillor Anderson returns, I will address his comments about me in respect of Greater Manchester, but until then I shall carry on. So when now Lord Stevens arrived in the NHS in 2014, the long-term plan was produced, and that long-term plan has been, as Councillor Kenny has just said in her contribution, it has been done by stealth. It's very, very quietly done. It's under the radar. There is virtually nothing in the media about this bill. There is little about the implications of it. If you speak to local residents, very few of them know anything about this at all, anything about the changes that are planned. You speak to huge numbers of people who actually work in the NHS. Most of them don't know anything about it either. It's all been done very, very quietly. There is absolutely no doubt that private businesses will be able to make, well, they already make several billions in contracts to the private sector through the NHS at the moment. Members this side of the chamber start from the position that what is publicly funded should be publicly delivered, most certainly not delivered by the private sector. Because I have spent a lot of time in the United States one way or another over the last 20 odd years, I've seen US healthcare firsthand. People are absolutely frightened to get sick because they know they're not going to be able to afford it. They're not going to be able to afford to pay for their healthcare because even if they have health insurance, they still have to pay what they call a deductible, we call an excess. So there's always a chunk to pay. I've seen a very dear friend who had Parkinson's who could not afford the medication that he needed to take for that and ended up having to try and purchase it from Canada by mail order. My own cousin waited about 7 years to get the back surgery that she needed because she had to wait until she paid off the debts that she'd accumulated from giving birth to her son. And that's the reality of healthcare in the United States. That is not a route that we want to go down. We don't want to see people. First question you ask about a job when you get a new job is not how much you're being paid or are you enjoying it. It's what's the healthcare package? What's the insurance deal that you're getting from your employer? Because that's what matters, and that's why people in the States end up taking jobs. We've talked here about, in fact, the point that Councillor Anderson made.
Can you please wrap up now, please, Yvonne? I'm sorry to interrupt.
I am going to answer the point, if I may, Mr Mayor, because it was a personal point that Councillor Anderson made about me. Yes, I did work in Greater Manchester. And I am aware of the comments that were made by the former Chief Executive about the local authority and the health service coming together as equal partners. And that's exactly what happened in Manchester, because that devolution and that funding was equal partners. What was set up, as you well know, Councillor Anderson, was an equal partnership between health and local authority. This is not what's proposed. This is not what's being proposed here. The control will lie, as has already been said, hugely with the Secretary of State, massive powers with the Secretary of State, and significant powers at regional level. What we're asking for here is to have some element of control at a local level, so that we do still have local input and democratic accountability. And yes, I will sit at that table because I will defend people against the first impact of this bill. and I will sit there at the table and sup with a very long spoon.
Councillor Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. I think I will. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillors Daisy Kenny, Councillor Gorman, Councillor Camford on their I'd also like to congratulate Councillor Brian Kenny on his choice of attire this evening. I'm not sure what that's about. With regards to this motion this evening, I'd like to talk a little bit about one of my previous iterations in politics in Staffordshire. And that was, I had the unfortunate task of visiting a gentleman and his wife, and the gentleman kind of accepted the fact that the gentleman was about to die. He was suffering from cancer. It had been a long time, and the NHS had done a fantastic job in elongating his time on this earth with his wife to enjoy. However, the reason they called me to their property was not because of the healthcare that they'd been provided, but just because of the absolute confusion around who was meant to do what and who had oversight for what, and being pushed from pillar to post, whether it was care, whether it was medical, whether it was the support from Macmillan, who we all know do a fantastic job, I'm sure. And for me, if an integrated care system delivered locally can actually take the burden off someone who is suffering in their last days of their life one jot and make their life one jot easier, then I think it's justified. I'd also like to touch on what Brian Kenny said with regards to, Councillor Brian Kenny, wouldn't want to be tasked with calling anyone the first name, about alienating or almost removing council input. I think by virtue of the fact of what the Standards and Constitutional Oversight Committee have just had to put themselves through for the last couple of months, I think it's clear that it's the polar opposite. The fact that we've had to give a dispensation to anyone with any relationship to the NHS and integrated care shows that we will have much more input to this potential integrated care system. So I would just like to appeal to members' better judgment, shall we say, and think about not just the ideological move of saving the NHS from this imaginary bogeyman that, if we're honest, the NHS has never, ever, ever been 100% provided by the public sector. It just hasn't since inception. It's been public, private and voluntary since day one, and that's just fact, and I challenge anyone to prove differently. And I would just urge you to think about not just the NHS, but about the end user and the difficulties that they have, and I think this gives a genuine chance to actually have a system that people can understand that will make their lives better. Thank you.
Councillor Dave Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillors Kenny and Camphor on their maiden speeches and Councillor Gorman on his maiden question, just to get the facts correct. I would hate to think. Congratulations, Harry, anyway. One of my constituents. But anyway, I'd like to pick up a few points that have been made in relation to funding and what's going on, and specifically into point 4 in the amendment that we put forward to the notice of motion. And that's to request a financial forecast for the full context that Wirral will face, as Edward Edgar MP had stated. Local systems will be informed of their resource envelope at the start of the year and will be required to agree and plan that matches it or within that envelope. And the reason I'm reading that out, Mr. Mayor, is because we all know that the latest settlement that came through from government is that a percentage of the council tax is to pay for the funding of social care. Now, where that balance takes place in what the NHS does and social care, we've heard Councillor Cox mention about his former life as a councillor and the effect that had on one of his local residents.
We see that on a daily basis, don't we? All of us, every one of us. Whether people say, well, where do I get the care from? I go to them, they say it's not us, it's them. This is the one thing that needs to be clarified once and for all, because at the Partnership Committee, those members that were there, and anybody who watched it will have noticed, I asked the first 3 questions in relation to what was going forward. And it was a revelation because the doctor that appeared to that committee was very clear and forthright in his answers. I said the change into the system is that we've got now, it's 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Have we got enough GPs to fill these positions? Simple answer, no. We know that, and it's been proved since because we've read in the media and it's been in the press. We're at least 6,000, if not 6,500 GPs short to provide the services that we require. And these are basically the care services, the local care services that everybody attunes to. I found it very hard to take in his last comments when I asked the question in relation to the CQCs disappearing because they're all in small groups at the moment. But with the integrated care system coming in, we know we'll have one group of people looking after all the funding, which will be told how to spend it by the Secretary of State for Health and Employment. My question to him was, how do you see it going forward? Given into account that this has got to be in place by April next year. And he made a 2-word comment, and that was worried and concerned. Now, if the Secretary of the medical organisation for Merseyside makes those sorts of comments, I think people need to take notice. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Stuart Whittingham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Councillors Gorman, Camphor and Kenny on their maiden contributions and speeches. Absolutely fantastic to see that. And I would also like to pay tribute to all our NHS and care staff for working so hard and getting us through this pandemic. Without them, we certainly would have been in a dark place. And, it's all right clapping for the NHS and our carers. That needs to be backed up by actions, not claps. Mr. Mayor, to me, when it comes to the NHS and anything this government does, it's about trust. And to be quite honest, on their previous form, I find there's a lot of people who find it difficult to trust the government at all. We see that ministers lying with impunity. We see during the COVID crisis, that crisis being used to advantage by ministers awarding dodgy COVID contracts to their mates. MPs have found that it was more important what minister was on your contact list than proper procurement processes. And I like to see when the eventual inquiry comes to fruition, how widespread that problem is, but certainly in the billions. And yes, let's talk about the patients. Let's talk about all the patients that are stuck in the back of ambulances now. We don't know how many ambulances are stuck outside Harrow Park. Let's speak about the poor woman who on the 11th of October died of a heart attack after being stuck outside the hospital in an ambulance for 2 hours. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the former senior doctor who died of a heart attack after waiting 30 minutes for an ambulance to turn up. The system, the NHS, is broken, and has been broken for a number of years. And COVID, in my opinion, has just taken over the edge. Now, on the health and care bill, I like to listen to experts, right? And when you get like Dr. David Wrigley, who's the deputy chair of the BMA Council, saying this is not the right time to be making such widespread changes to a health service. What's more, the bill addresses none of the problems the NHS is currently facing, which is too few resources, too little funding, and a crisis in social care, and a huge shortage of staff. It does not address the problems of a workforce that is exhausted and depleted by the pandemic, and is now facing another wave, which is now underway. And evidence is showing that. I think it's about time we got a grip. stop be forcing changes behind the scenes that's going to benefit the rich and business. Let's start thinking about the people and get the NHS back on track.
Mr Mayor, this notice of motion and the amendment contains some 757 words, only 2 of which are patient. Patients should be at the heart of everything we do. Over the past 18 months, the National Health Service has largely become the National COVID Service, and we tackled a worldwide crisis. But patients have other needs too. Every year, over 166,000 people die from cancer in the UK. That's 1 every 4 minutes, or 40 since the start of this meeting. Health and social care must meet the needs of all our patients. Patients are not interested in the ICS, the ICPs, PCNs or CCGs, nor do they hanker after the halcyon days of PCTs and SHAs. What they want when they get sick is to see a GP. But with only 0.4 GPs per 1,000 population, it's not always possible or appropriate. They may see an ANP or an AHP, a PA or a pharmacist, the only profession, it seems, without an acronym. They want a competent healthcare professional to get them sorted or referred for specialist secondary care, and they want their care to be seamless from beginning to end. Mr Mayor, it goes without saying that workforce is the major constraint. Staff are exhausted by 18 months of the pandemic and fearful of what winter may bring. They want to be able to offer the very best care to their patients and work in an organisation where systems talk to each other. NHS England understood the needs of patients and staff and outlined its vision to achieve them in its long-term plan. The legislation going through Parliament at present is a response to that document. Mr Mayor, the pandemic has accelerated moves to partnership working, unlocked innovation and strengthened local relationships. This will be critical going forward as we tackle the backlog and live with the long-term impact of COVID. Across the country, we see examples of how partnership working is benefiting patients. In East Croydon, in Sussex, in Coventry, Bolton and Harrogate. Mr Mayor, I work in the NHS. I believe in the NHS, free at the point of delivery. It has served us well for over 70 years, and I hope it goes on for another 70 and beyond. But it's not perfect. Medicine and technology have come a long way since 1948. It's time to stop rearranging the deck chairs and change course and grasp the opportunity of a better future for all our patients and our staff.
Councillor Chris.
Oh, and I apologise for not congratulating our 3 members on their maiden speech.
Thanks, Mary. Chris Kruger.
Thanks, Mary, for reminding me. Congratulations for your maiden speeches, folks. I've listened to all the comments on this, and it's really is interesting to hear the different viewpoints, but they're all underlying the same sort of thing, really, that we all value the NHS and what they do. Some have made statements that are quite bizarre, I think, about deaths and waiting in ambulances for years and the rest of it. I'm just going to give you a couple of things that I've been thinking about. I have 3 GPs in my family. One of you is a GP trainer. And although we're short of thousands of GPs that we need, 5,000, 6,000 or whatever, the one thing he does tell me is that somewhere in the region of 60% of the existing GPs are all coming up to retirement age. So that number is going to grow exponentially. So that's the first point I was going to make. Second point I was going to make is that the joined up thinking here of how the NHS and the home services are actually going to join together, because I do believe that it would be an advantage. However, I'm very concerned about how it will work and how it's going to go through, because generally people like to look at their own area and there will be gaps between this section, that section, the next section. And to give you an example of what I mean, I have a constituent who's 80 who had a mini stroke on Tuesday. She was taken to Harrow Park, got dealt with immediately by ambulance. She's now home. She sent her home at 4 o'clock in the morning. She went home to her 88-year-old husband, who luckily is able to deal with things. And they were brilliant. I don't think anybody can say anything about the staff, the commitment, the way it works at the moment, how much effort they put in and skill sets that they have to deal with these issues. I think the problem lies in the fact that we don't have enough nurses now. And I dread to say it's about Brexit, but we've got no nurses. GPs have all gone home. All these kind of things. And my question is, if we go down the route of joined up thinking with everybody else, who's going to make the decisions? And how is a general person of the population going to know who to talk to? The comment was made about GPs. Yes, you do want to go and see your GP. I sat with 2 GPs the other week, and they both told me that they have no idea what happens outside their GP surgery in relation to all the problems that people face, because they are sat in their own little world in the GP surgery, and they only deal with that. So he was there, they were there asking me, what other issues do we need to look at in the community so we can help people to deal with their problems, because we only see them when they come to us with illnesses, not what the causes are. So if we can deal with the cause, they'll stop coming to see me. In other words, bad housing and all the rest of it. So just to finish quickly, I think the NHS is a jewel in our crown, and I agree with everything that most people have said. By the way, the 2 residents who, the 80-year-old residents were my mother and father. So I will never have anything said against the NHS for their developments. Thank you.
Sorry, Steve, do you wish to speak?
No, only because, again, they fell into the trap of mentioning me by name earlier on in your speech, Tom. Credits where credit's due. Yes, we did stop the planning law going through Parliament. We moved the notice of motion here and aired our views. But that message must have got through to enough Tory members of MP, members of Parliament, to make them frightened, to make them scared. And that's what's not happening with this bill. We hear integrated care system. It doesn't really mean anything to people. And I salute the work of Save Our NHS organisation on Wirral. But they're taking the message out. Because what's underneath the sub-headline, the sanitised headline, or the abbreviations moved by other councillors, is the fact that this is an open door to the privatisation of the National Health Service. That's what it's about. So if you can get that message to people, then enough Tory MPs will get frightened. Once you get enough Tory MPs frightened, then the bill gets stopped. And that's what happened with the planning law. Enough of them were scared about their own seats. So that's the methodology of bringing notices of motion to this council. If everyone in the country did the same, if everyone wrote to their Tory MP and said, we are not voting for a bill that allows more privatisation in the NHS, they will get frightened and they will make another U-turn. If one thing this government is famous for is U-turn after U-turn, because they're frightened for their own seats. And that's what we should be doing. And that's what Stop the NHS Being Privatised campaign is all about. Get the message out there. Tell the citizens, tell your constituents, write to Tory MPs, tell them to change tack. Do not privatise the National Health Service. Not in my name, you don't, mate.
Thank you very much indeed for all those 12 speakers. Now, can I ask if Councillor Cannon, do you wish to exercise your right as the seconder of the amendments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The introduction of the integrated care system is the biggest change to the NHS since 1948. A point members on this side of the chamber have heard many times before. I don't apologise for that though, Mr. Mayor, as it's with a hope that everyone can see the enormity of what the introduction of an integrated care system actually means. What I want to ensure tonight is that the public are aware of the changes that are happening to our NHS, and more importantly, Mr. Mayor, at a speed that we've never seen before. A change that has come without meaningful consultation, a change that will threaten statutory legislation that was originated in order to protect our most vulnerable. A change that detrimentally impacts on our valued NHS staff. And it was those staff, Mr. Mayor, that we applauded literally at the height of the pandemic. And now this Act proposes to impact on those valued workers, their jobs, their pay and their conditions. A change that strengthens the role of private companies, and with that the real fear of a creation of a two-tiered healthcare system. A change that will inevitably further widen health inequalities in our borough and in our country. This evening, Mr Mayor, one of our opposition councillors spoke passionately about the lack of mental health services here on Wirral, and he delivered that speech without any sense of irony, as if the lack of service has nothing to do with his government's criminal lack of underfunding of the NHS, and that has in fact led to the cuts in the services that we have endured over this past decade. Nowhere in this bill has indicated to me about anything about new money, unless, of course, Mr Mayor, the government is hoping that those big American insurance companies will bring with them a large chequebook. So, Mr Mayor, I urge this chamber to support the motions to tonight to ensure that what is publicly funded remains publicly delivered. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And finally, proposer of the original motion, Councillor Brian Kenny, you have your right of reply and may address the council for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've always believed that during a debate there's no need to actually exercise a right of reply unless there's actually been opposition. And to be honest, I'm disappointed that there's been a lot of opposition to this motion tonight. Well, first of all, Councillor Anderson let the cat out the bag and he revealed that it's not just the Wirral Labour group who support the principle of keeping the NHS public. Well, yeah, I'm happy to say there are people up and down this country who believe in the principle about keeping the NHS public. Now, but this motion is on the agenda tonight because everybody in this Labour group believes in it, and that's why I'm moving it on behalf of the Labour group. And despite wearing this shirt, Mr Mayor, I do know the difference between right and wrong. And just briefly, Councillor Cox, the reason I'm wearing this, at the Mayor's ball on Friday, an auction prize was agreed that a sum of money would be put forward if I wore this shirt tonight, so I couldn't resist. Now again, Councillor Anderson spoke about what's happening in Manchester and Cheshire, and other Conservatives spoke about other parts of the country. Well, we live in the Wirral. We're representing people in the Wirral by putting this motion forward tonight. And when Councillor McLaughlin says things like the NHS is precious, she's quite right. When she says that social care will be cut, again, she's quite right. Sorry, Mr Mayor, I should, before I go any further, congratulate the 3 councillors, Councillor Camphor, Daisy Kenny and Councillor Gorman for their maiden speeches. Sorry. Councillor Camphor spoke about removing barriers, improving outcomes and tackling inequalities. But the problem is, Mr Mayor, as it stands, the proposal put forward by this Conservative government will actually give more power to private companies and the Secretary of State at the expense of people who need the services. And Councillor Jordan's quite right when she said the NHS is not perfect. I don't think anybody in this room is actually arguing that the NHS is perfect, and we can always look at making improvements. Again, Councillor Cox spoke about confusion, and he said that there's confusion at the moment. Yes, there are times when people are confused. But this proposal put forward by the Tory government will not get rid of that confusion. If you look at the terms of this motion, what it's calling for is consultation, because Councillor Nolan's quite right. Too many people in this country, including some people who work for the NHS, don't really know what's happening. The plans are being railroaded through by a Conservative majority in the House of Commons. And if the issues are so good, why don't we hear the Prime Minister, for example, in his recent speech to the Conservative conference, which I watched, why doesn't he highlight this? Why doesn't he seek praise for what they're trying to do on this issue? This is a vital issue. It's crucial, and too many people are in the dark. Finally, Mr Mayor, I will remind people what the motion is actually calling for. Look at it, and I'd ask you, how can you vote against something which calls for an extended and meaningful consultation with the public and Parliament to decide how health and social care services are provided in England, and demand an immediate halt to the rollout of ICSs until such a consultation and exploration has taken place? Consultation with Parliament so that everybody knows exactly what's being proposed. And then the final point of the motion, Mr Mayor, it talks about promoting the introduction of legislation to bring about a universal, comprehensive and publicly provided NHS fit for the 21st century. Again, how can you argue against that? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Thank you for that, Brian. Now then, there are no further speakers. I will move to the vote.
I'll vote, Mr Mayor.
What could possibly go wrong?
Tell you what, my brother's working great at night.
Like the good, why don't you just have a bit of a wait?
Thank you, members and Mr Mayor. Members, I will...
Please.
Members, I will conduct a roll call of members in the room. When your name is called, I would ask you to rise and state your vote. Councillor Anderson.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just to clarify, this is the motion as amended.
Yeah, yes, Mr Mayor, yes. The original motion was altered by the acceptance of a friendly motion. Councillor Berry.
Against.
Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Booth.
Against.
Councillor Brame.
For.
Councillor Brennan.
For.
Councillor Burgess-Joyce.
Against.
Councillor Cameron.
Against.
Councillor Camphor.
Against.
Councillor Cannon.
For.
Councillor Corubia.
For.
Councillor Cleary.
For.
Councillor Clements.
Against.
Councillor Collins.
Against.
Councillor Collinson.
For.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Cottier.
For.
Councillor Cox.
Against.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Fawkes.
For.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Gardner.
Against.
Councillor Gilchrist.
For.
Councillor Gleaves.
For.
Councillor Gorman.
For.
Councillor Carl Greeny.
For.
Councillor Jeff Green.
Against.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Hayes. Paul Hayes.
Against.
Councillor Stephen Hayes.
For.
Councillor Andrew Hodson. Councillor Cathy Hodson.
Against.
Councillor Johnson.
Against.
Adrian Jones. I did, Councillor Jones. Councillor Chris Jones.
For.
Councillor Tony Jones.
For.
Councillor Jordan.
Against.
Councillor Kelly.
For.
Councillor Brian Kenny.
For.
Councillor Daisy Kenny.
For.
Councillor Lewis. Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor McLaughlin.
For.
Councillor McManus.
For.
Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Mountney. Councillor Nolan.
For.
Councillor O'Hagan.
For.
Councillor Poville.
Against.
Councillor Rennie.
Against.
Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Rowlands.
Against.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Spriggs.
For.
Councillor Stewart.
For.
Councillor Jason Walsh.
For.
Councillor Joe Walsh. Councillor Whittingham.
Sorry, for.
Councillor Irene Williams. Councillor Jerry Williams. Councillor Steve Williams.
Against.
Councillor Williamson.
For.
Councillor Wood. And Councillor Wright.
Against.
Thank you, members.
Votes in favour, 41. Votes against, 23. That is carried. With your indulgence, I know we're very, very close to the guillotine. Any second, in fact, I think. But can I just have a 2-minute comfort break myself? Lots of people have been going in and out, but I'm just,
Yes.
if you don't mind. 2 Thank you very much indeed, just to do that, and it coincides, because we now call the guillotine. So, where are we now? Motion 2. Mr. Mayor, with your indulgence.
If I can refresh your memory at the beginning of the meeting, you did give your word and promise us that we would be able to debate this subject. That's what you said.
Well, we're not tonight now. Thank you, Andrew.
That's all you have to say.
End of story. Right. Motion 2. Spartina, Anglica risks to the northwest foreshore. It's been proposed by Councillor Tony Cox and seconded by Andrew Gardner. So, could you formally move and second them, please, Councillor Cox?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
So seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much indeed. We'll move straight to the vote. All those in favour?
No, too late for that.
Too late for that.
Too late, too late.
Okay. All those against?
Surprise, surprise.
Any abstentions? Nope. Okay. Continue. Right. Votes in favour, 23. Votes against, 41. That is lost. Motion 3, protecting residents from flood risk. Proposal of the motion, Councillor Braham. You have, oh no, sorry, sorry. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to talk now. I invite Councillors Alan Braham and Jason Walsh to move and second their motions, which is included in the council summit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In moving, can I say, to speed things up, we are happy to accept the amendment to this motion, so that we just have the one vote on the amended motion, if that's acceptable.
Thank you very much indeed.
So seconded, Mr. Mayor.
We need to move and second the amendment as per club.
No, it's been accepted. No, been accepted. Okay.
Just to explain, members, that doesn't need to be proposed and seconded as an amendment if council consents to the alteration.
All those in favour, please show. I think it's a full house.
It was your amendment, did it, Steve?
Okay. All those against? Thank you very much. Any abstentions? No? Thank you. Motion 4, equal pavements pledge. I now invite Councillors Harry Gorman and Pat Cleary to move and second their motion, which is included in council summit.
Yep, we'll agree to the amendment, so moved.
Does that count as a proposal?
Yeah, seconded, Mr. Mayor.
They've accepted the amendments. Councillor Cleary, you okay?
Yeah, seconded formally. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in... Sorry. Council happy to accept the alteration? Thank you. Right, all those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much indeed. All against, anyone against? No, lovely. Is that the last one? No, motion 5. funding caring services to meet Wirral's needs. I now invite councillors Phil Gilchrist and Dave Mitchell to move and second their motion, which is included in the councillor's funds.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There's no... Just get it over there. Right, that's it. Yeah. So all those in favour, please show. Those against? Thank you very much indeed. That's unanimous. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the conclusion of the council tonight. Can I thank the people who have made their maiden speeches tonight? It's been good, and I also would just like to make one comment. I haven't had the opportunity yet to meet new councillors on my own, but things are in progress so that I can actually meet up with you good selves. I'd like to thank everyone who attended the Mayor's Ball the other night. It was a success. The amount of money yet, because I haven't been told myself, but it was a very successful evening. I'd like to thank everybody who actually went along to the ball, but also contributed, including Councillor Brian Kenny in his Liverpool shirt. Thank you very much indeed. So many thanks, and I declare the meeting closed.